Acho que é importante, pelo menos, trazermos isto à consciência, o facto de nós estarmos hoje aqui, depois de uns dias após a catástrofe que aconteceu bem perto de nós, e trazer isso à consciência, trazermos isso à consciência, se calhar, com um minuto de silêncio, é aquilo que nós podemos fazer, pelo menos para já. Manifestar o nosso pesar, naturalmente, por todas as pessoas que pereceram naquele evento, naquele momento, mas também dizer que nós não cancelámos este momento porque nos pareceu, em consciência, que era um momento que podíamos, na mesma, continuar. A presença do autor, o autor já se encontrava em Portugal e, portanto, resolvemos continuar. E, portanto, com o maior respeito por todas as pessoas que perderam a vida, acho que é um bom momento para nós refletirmos um minuto de silêncio e ficarmos em nós. Bom, vamos continuar. Thank you, JEM, for coming, for the launch of your book. Thank you. O momento que tivemos em cima foi diferente este é mais expositivo e portanto, pedimos a vossa atenção agora para a palestra que vai haver e depois teremos o Pedro Macedo e a Carlota, que também vão, anfitriar este momento. Agradecer muito ao facto do Alcides, que está ali ao fundo, que segurou o movimento em cima, lá em cima, juntamente com o professor Jorge Juliano de Rosa, que está ali atrás, que muito agradeço. Pessoas que prefaciaram o livro, Pedro Macedo também teve esse privilégio de prefaciar o livro. E a Luísa Fischer, que é uma brasileira, que obviamente por razões naturais não está em Portugal, mas também quisemos fazer a ponte. O livro em português, ou melhor, a edição portuguesa do livro, nós fomos provocadores, de modo que os brasileiros também fizessem sair este livro, e ele vai sair, mas vai sair em princípio em janeiro do ano que vem, e portanto, nós fomos os anfitriões desta primeira edição em português. E muito obrigado também a todos os que intervieram. Muito obrigado à Casa do Comum e a todos os elementos que estão presentes aqui, ao Rogério e a todos os outros que estão aqui, e toda a equipa fantástica e, sobretudo, esta forma agradável de fazermos um encontro. Acho que é muito agradável estar no meio dos livros, porque, de facto, essa é a nossa praia. E, portanto, muito obrigado também por terem vindo a todos vocês e até já.
So, just to know, how many people here don't understand English? Alguém que não percebe inglês? No, okay, great. Yeah. So I'm a spontaneous moderator today. I'll do my best. I'm Carlota. I feel that also this tragedy that happened in Lisbon, also in the context of that tragedy, I feel like Breaking Together is a very powerful book. At least my experience of it is that it's a book that really has clear this message of memento mori, remember you'll die, and not in a way that is fatalistic, but actually is inviting one to just sit with the seriousness of that issue and then live your most beautiful life possible precisely because of it. So maybe as a segue into the introduction of this book and you, Jem, telling a bit what this book is about, you also spoke sometimes about this double meaning of breaking together. So maybe you could start there, sharing a bit of this meaning of the title and what the book is about. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you to both of you for acknowledging the somber context. And yeah, obviously a tragedy like what's happened with the Gloria funicular triggers so many different thoughts and emotions, incomprehension. But yes, you're right. One thing that we can all take from it is also this realizing that we don't know when our day will come, and yeah, many philosophers and wisdom teachers have told us to live with death on our shoulder and love in our hearts, and yeah, often grief reminds us of the fact that we love. And so, and we've all had our own experiences of grief in life and how it's reminded us of how much we love. So, yeah, with such a shock and unavoidable disaster, then there's also that side to it too. And thank you all of you for coming out, despite this shock that Lisbon and therefore yourselves are having right now. I will come to your question. But I've just been sitting here really enjoying being in a bookshop. I love it, and I realize it's because I've been living out of a suitcase, really, so I don't have my bookshelves anymore, and I would never, I just don't think, I shouldn't say that, should I? I don't think about buying books anymore. Oops. But you should buy mine. But because I'm living out of a suitcase, so it's all on my device, and or audio. And it's so nice, because it's a reminder of how much I love the creative exploration of ideas. I love it. And what it's reminded me of is that I remember when I lived in Singapore, I used to go to an old second-hand bookshop just to feel a bit human again. I don't know if anyone's been to Singapore, but it's so glitzy, so modern, glass and steel and concrete and people making shitloads of money, and apart from me when I was there. But the bookshop, I'd go there and it'd be like, oh, yes, I felt rooted, connected, and reminded of the joy of being human. And I was actually having a date. I was meant to have a date in that bookshop, and she didn't show up. So, but I remember that's when, therefore, I was looking on, and I saw a book called When You're Falling, Dive. So dive. And it was by Mark Matusek. And because my date didn't show up, I ended up buying the book. And it's a book about how much treasure there is in our deepest wounds. And so there were lots of interviews with people who'd lost partners through the AIDS crisis, for example. And it was very, very powerful. It was a very spiritual book, and yet in such an accessible way, where it was basically for me, it was a very new thing to reframe suffering, disease, death, tragedy, and even incomprehensible, like unfair loss. In a way, reframe that as a path of despair to some kind of existential, eternal joy. And with testimonies of people who had done that. And I think looking back, I think that would have been 2008, 2009, 2010, around then. I think looking back, that book and that sense that we can find some sort of also even magical power in our emotional suffering helped me as I started to look again at the data and the science on just how bad things are with the world's climate. And it doesn't make just because I can find some personal transformation through going through my own grief and despair doesn't make the tragedy of climate change go away. Of course it doesn't. It doesn't lessen it. But it also, I think, shows that me and many other people, we can allow it to change us, allow the awareness of it to change us. And then we don't know what will happen as a result, as more and more of us give up our old stories, identities, habits of living, are shocked awake by the tragedy of climate change. And then we'll something different will happen. But you've asked me about the title of the book. So in English it's Breaking Together. Now, there's the phrase, you shouldn't judge a book by its cover, but we all do, and I'm really pleased I did. I loved the title, When You're Falling Dive, so I ended up picking it up. So I want to say a little bit about the cover first, before the title. What's this on the front? Anyone recognize it? Atlas. Yes, Atlas. It's quite a cheeky use of Atlas, and I'll come back to that. But so this is the Farnese Atlas, which I think we can still find in Rome. I think it's one of the oldest, if not the oldest, statue of Atlas. So Atlas was a Greek Titan god, and I'm not a classicist, but my reading of it is also a bit unconventional. So, according to what we think about what the ancients knew, that's not the planet Earth on his back, because they supposedly didn't think the Earth was round, but actually there's some good evidence they did thousands of years ago. That's meant to be the heavens. And so he's carrying the whole of the heavens, the universe, on his back, or not carrying it on his back, holding it up. Because the myth is that Atlas was cursed with having to hold up the heavens, otherwise they would come crashing down and kill everyone, including the family he loved. And so some readings of the Titan gods, they represent aspects of not nature, but human nature. And so you can read into this a story that, well, so if Atlas represents humans and where humans are, then, we don't have to hold up the heavens. They won't, if we stop trying to hold up the heavens, they won't come crashing down, they won't kill our family. So actually, he was cursed with the idea that he had to hold up the heavens and believing it. And it's actually kind of nice, isn't it nice that he actually tried to save everyone, including his family, by struggling to hold up the heavens. But also it was a delusion. It's extremely anthropocentric. It's all down to you, Atlas. So the other thing I've done there, anyone Japanese in the audience? No, anyone been to Japan? So I've done what's called kintsugi. So I made this with my friend Darinka Monteko, an artist. And kintsugi is the idea that things that we love at home, we break. Probably we've all had a mug or a cup or a plate that's been passed down through generations, and we accidentally break it. And then if you stick it back together again with gold, cleverly, it can look really beautiful. And so it's no longer the same function. It's no longer the plate or the mug that you might use like it used to be used. Instead, it's a symbol of how you somehow cherish your connection with the past and the memories of community and in your family. Maybe it might remind you of your deceased mother or grandmother. So it becomes an object of love and veneration because of it breaking and then being stuck back together again. So the Kintsugi Atlas is talking about this idea of anthropocentrism, how we fucked up the planet because we thought we were the center of everything, And we thought we had to save everything, and actually if we'd just chilled out and been nice and fitted in with the rest of ecology, we wouldn't have destroyed it as we have. But it's actually kind of nice that we still care. It's kind of nice that we want to try and fix things. So let's try and put this back together again in a better way. So there you go, that's the cover. So if you're judging the book by the cover and you like that story, there's far more in it than that. So please buy it. So the Breaking Together. How do you say that? Can you say that title in Portuguese?
Juntos na Rutura, slightly different.
Yes. So Breaking Together is there's two big sections to it. The first half, second half. The first half is about how all the foundational systems of modern industrial consumer society are breaking together. They're breaking at the same time. So our energy systems, food systems, political systems, money systems, economic systems, biodiversity, and also a stable climate. And so there are these sort of cascading failures. And so what's breaking is more than just because of, in some countries, some things have gone wrong, perhaps because of a bad political class or a leader or some unhelpful situations for that climate or a particular bad enemy or whatever. It's saying, no, this is a worldwide decline indicated by data on biodiversity, climate, economics, Human Development Index, life expectancy, etc. There's this ongoing decline, and it's caused by, I argue in the book, the foundations of modern industrial consumer life beginning to fracture. And so therefore I conclude that we don't fix this, we don't go back to how it's been in recent decades for the majority of the middle class, the consumer class. This will continue. And so what I say is then, we could call it a breakdown, but a breakdown can also people think, well, we can then fix it up again. If a car breaks down, we fix it and it goes away again. I use the word collapse to say that we don't fix this. We don't know how fast, how bad, how widespread, and we don't know how long a kind of a collapsed situation will last, and we don't know what comes next. But that leaves open lots of questions for what we do, but also leaves open lots of questions about what we stop doing if we think that we can't continue this way of life. So that's the first half, and then the second half is the other meaning of the term breaking together, which is that rather than breaking apart ourselves in our communities or between nations and ethnicities and religions, rather than developing a bunker mentality like I want to protect me and my family, and a bunker mentality can be expressed in many ways. It can be anti-immigrant, it can be even I want to go away and live in an eco-community with me and my friends and nobody else. There are many ways of having a bunker mentality. It's saying rather than doing that, can we find ways of being open about our difficult emotions, our pain in the situation, our wishes in that context, and try and retain what's good about humans and human community. So that can we break together rather than apart in this context? And rather than that being a completely naive hope, in the book I talk about people who, because of either the disruption to their life that they've been through, or their awareness of, their acceptance of an unraveling of either ecology or climate or their society, they've changed their lives. They've quit their jobs, they've decided to become community leaders or activists or yoga teachers or anything. I mention a few different people doing different interesting things. And I also say that rather than just being kind of apolitical and atomistic in our personal choices, if we accept collapse is either underway or coming, we can also act collectively to try and resist what is likely or already beginning from incumbent power, from the money power, from elites who want to control the masses in this situation, and as they will get more and more panicked. In sociology, we call it elite panic, where it's proven whenever there's a disaster, one of the first things that the people in charge think is not just how to help, it's also how do we protect ourselves from the blame and prevent this turning into some kind of revolutionary moment. And then you often see, therefore, that authorities make matters worse. And I give some examples from history in the book as well. So why I'm super happy about it being in Portuguese. So thank you for beginning to having made that happen. Let's hear it for Bambawal Portugal. We're hey. Why I'm happy it's in Portuguese is, I don't know, when I was writing it, I wasn't really writing it for an English audience. It's a very anti-imperialist book. I don't see that a softening of the collapse or a planting of the seeds of the new is going to come from the West. I am much more interested whether these ideas will find their way in Francophone Africa, in Latin America, both Spanish and Portuguese speaking, and Indonesia and elsewhere. I live in Indonesia now. I'm really interested in these ideas reaching those basically the global South, because it saddens me, but I don't think the last couple of years of geopolitics proves otherwise. It saddens me that it seems to be that the West is quite brutal in its service of global capital and business as usual, and the profits of the arms companies and pharmaceutical companies and the banks and so on. So it may be the same. It may be the same if we were in a different world, not a sort of a Pax Americana world, but it means that I don't really hold up that much hope for big changes coming from the West. It might do, but I definitely want to not put all my eggs in that basket, and therefore I'm really pleased. And therefore I'm here in Portugal because it's easier for me to get to, and it's lovely to come to Lisbon. But I'm really excited by the keenness of Bambawal to get this book known about with a group of our friends in Brazil. Also, particularly because we need to really, the world needs to come together to do what it can to help Brazil save the Amazon. And that's not just for the Amazon, it's also for the global climate, which I might talk about a bit later.
Boa tarde. My name is Pedro, and I'm a JEM fan, if I can say that. In 2018, when the deep adaptation paper came out, I was doing my PhD in climate change and sustainable development. I was reading papers and papers, loads of papers every day, and suddenly there was your paper, and I'm really grateful to you because of that. Because finally I could see, someone is telling the truth, It was kind of, with all the bad news in the deep adaptation paper, it was kind of the light in the end of the tunnel, because I could see that at least someone, and of course it was not only JEM, but in a very clear way, someone was saying what needed to be said. And I think this book is all about that. And thank you so much. And thank you again, because in 2023 there was the book, and again it resonated. And I want to question about, and I know that we just said that you are in a different place from 2023, but in that moment you felt the push, let's say, to bring about this question of freedom, and how we need to do this global reclamation, and somehow also a resistance to different to what's happening. So maybe I would also, before going to the public and your questions, I would ask you about that, about the freedom contest that you bring about in your book.
Yeah, so since 2018, when my deep adaptation paper came out about climate change, where I concluded the situation was far worse than what the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change had been telling us, or the journalists who cover the IPCC had been telling us, including myself as someone who worked full-time in sustainability. So when that paper came out and went viral and stimulated a lot of reaction, strong reaction, positive and negative, I met some people who took it on board, who said, yes, this is the case. You've put it all together. This is what I felt. It's too late to stop a catastrophe, or it's too late to stop the breakdown of modern societies because of ecological degradation and climate change. Of course, that doesn't mean it's not too late to have a positive impact. But what I found was that some people then responded with the idea that we humans are horrible. We did this. So there was quite a bit of misanthropy. There's a kind of revulsion, and therefore a feeling like, well, I need to be better than that. And those two emotions coming together, because if you're going to talk about this is existential terror we're dealing with. That can therefore trigger things. So if you're going to talk about, then what I heard some people saying is that we need an elite, maybe to work with big tech, to force the global carbon cuts we need. It's too late to try and persuade everyone nicely to change. We need to save what we can. This is the future, the very future of the human race we're talking about. We just need to be brave enough to do what needs to be done. This kind of proto-eco-fascist rhetoric was actually quite normal amongst many people who were in there, coming to an awareness that I had come to. And some of them continued to write that and publish about that as well. And I don't know how far that's gone in policy circles, because I'm not involved in that. I wanted to, well, I think that will lead to unhelpful outcomes, because it will support elitist ideas about what to do, which will understandably and justifiably generate a backlash. And we've seen that already with this sort of anti-globalist backlash around climate change. It will also mean that, who has the elite power? It's the rich people, and they're the ones who then hang out with the bankers and the big industries, and therefore they'll come up with ideas about what should be done that just protect capital. We're definitely seeing that. But also for me, it was ignoring how there were choices made, economic and political and cultural systems that developed, which pushed us all in a certain way to be acquisitive and competitive and numb to the impacts on other humans and on the rest of life. And we wouldn't be here unless we didn't belong here as a species. So the terrible impacts have come about in the last couple of 100 years because of the very particular and recent, incredibly recent in the history of our species, set of economic, political and cultural relationships. So I wanted to advance something as a counterpoint philosophically and politically to a future of eco-authoritarianism, and I wanted to talk about freeing us from the pressures that make us externalize costs onto each other and nature, to compete, to always want to expand, I wanted to look at why that happens and how do we free ourselves from that. So that's why there's a couple of chapters on the monetary system in the book. Because we don't know how we would all be getting along as 8 billion people on planet Earth and how harmonious we could be with each other and nature if we didn't have this expansionist monetary system and the economics that's built on top of that, and then the militaries and stuff built on top of that. We don't know, and so I like to think we could, in the collapse, because what recognizing collapse does is it invites us to drop our deference to society and institutions as we find them, because it's ended up destroying things. So it invites us not to have a sort of an immediate acceptance of the legitimacy of socio-political and economic arrangements. So maybe it's a very revolutionary moment. I think it is. I think more and more people who would wake up to collapse can therefore become politically active rather than less. And I think that might help explain why there's been such an aggressive response from the best paid, most senior scientists, some of them, towards me and people like me, because they see this very much as a threat to their authority and the systems that put them where they are.
Thank you. And I would also now challenge the audience and to bring questions. I was thinking of Philippe after this intervention, so I'm sorry, but I will pass to Philippe. You were like, at the same time, but since probably there is a connection with the issue, I will pass it to Philippe and then to you, and I will invite you to present yourself when you start.
Thank you. I was already thinking about the question. I asked about it. Good evening, everyone. Good evening, JEM. Welcome. My question actually, well, I have many questions to you, but anyhow, the main one I would like to do today is like, not only about these people in climate. I am also a climate change scientist. Also have done my PhD. My PhD was about the monetary reform of the monetary system based on regenerative principles. But the question is, I deal a lot with actually international organizations like Greenpeace and others, to whom I've presented for a long time these kind of issues, and they reject to even communicate about collapse. They still communicate a lot that a 1.5 world is still possible. We can still fix this. Even within the Portuguese climate activism, there's still the narrative, no, we're going to hold the 1.5 is still possible. And these people have all very sophisticated arguments about this. Maybe they're too attached to the status quo. Maybe they are afraid of what's going to be the reaction of people when they know everything is going to down the hell. So I'm just wondering, you chose a completely different path, like presenting things as they are. Probably you've also been in these conversations with big actors like Greenpeace and others. So what do you tell them? And in this idea of presenting people collapse, or just still somehow, let's say, telling them it's still possible, how do you navigate these tensions? And what would you say, like to the, for example, Greenpeace people, etc., that still refuse to talk about collapse? Is something that they should do, not do? Like, how do you handle this?
Thank you. That's a fun question. So the people who responded most to my work in the summer of 2018 included people who were just setting up the climate and ecological protest group Extinction Rebellion. And their very first action was to go and occupy the Greenpeace head office in London. So that's kind of funny, and that's kind of forgotten. It wasn't blocking a bridge or a road, it was going and taking over the Greenpeace offices and saying, you're part of the problem. Because you are, in a number of ways, but one is, you're not telling the truth to the public about just how bad this is, and you're not seeking mass mobilization. You're not seeking to challenge the government on this, like the very legitimacy of the government per se. You're just still thinking this is an issue. Please do something on this, please. So that was interesting. I haven't followed how the environmental NGO sector are talking or not about just how bad climate has become. It would be fascinating to know, because no one who says let's keep 1.5 alive is telling you that they care about reality, because the last 12 months we were over 1.5, and so now it's, what is it, 2 years we're over 1.5, and the El Nino came and went and we're still over 1.5, and so all the top climatologists, even Michael Mann kind of slightly, but the rest of them are all saying climate change is accelerating and we don't know why. We've got theories, but we can't agree about why. So, and the IPCC came out, what is it, when it got radical in October 2018, and said we needed to cut carbon emissions by half by 2030 to then have a 50% chance of staying under 1.5 by when? Was it 2040? Can't remember. But we're already, just a few years later, we're already through that. And of course some people say, oh, well, it's temporary, we'll go down. But we're not going down. It's not happening. So, so for me, it means that then, like, I don't have to do your job. I'm not talking to these people anymore face to face. It'd be interesting. Maybe you could try different tactics. One is to say that, so here's the, the thermometer tells me that you're delusional. Thermometer. 1.5 alive. Like, it just, do you want to argue with the boiling point of water as well? I mean, why are you doing your job? Like, or you could just understand the deep needs of someone working in contemporary professional environmentalism, which is, I need to feel like I'm a good person in sort of comfortable opposition to some policies that's still respected by my friends, still, and it's all still kind of manageable. And say, okay, if that's their world, is there another way in? Yeah, maybe get them down the bar and ask them how are they really feeling.
Even within Portuguese climate activism, even the most radical, they still have the narrative of 1.5. They still believe in that narrative. They have no problems of being the anti-system, but they still keep the 1.5 narrative.
I'll say something else then. So, quite a lot of the climatologists have. Can we turn one of them off? Three. So there's bad news and good news. We can't explain the last 2 years of temperature rises through carbon dioxide alone. And so we know it's because of it's correlated with a drop in Earth albedo, so the reflectivity of the Earth, and therefore the Earth's energy imbalance. And there are lots of theories on that, but two very clear ones where there's good science for a long period of time is that deforestation reduces natural cloud seeding, which is not just a regional but a global phenomenon. So the Amazon rainforest, for example, seeds clouds over Tibet. So you find pollen in snow on mountains in Tibet that came from the Amazon. But also phytoplankton give off a sulfurous gas, which then ends up seeding clouds. And it's super important to have clouds over the ocean. It's debatable how important clouds are over land, because it depends on is it going to be reflected off the ground or not. But if the sun's rays hit the ocean, not the frozen ocean, but the ocean, then they're absorbed mostly. So ocean cloud seeding is massively important. Remember, we should really be called planet ocean, not planet Earth. So, 90% of all the energy from that's being captured because of anthropogenic influences that's gone into the oceans. So if we can't explain the current climate emergency from purely carbon dioxide, then why isn't forest conservation, afforestation, reforestation, agroforestry, and ocean health looking at, and that could mean not just reducing pollution and microplastics, but also even thinking about fertilizing the ocean artificially to help phytoplankton. Why isn't that top of the agenda? It's not because there's a dogma in climate. For me, climatology is now just tribal. It's like you're either part of the good guys who will only talk about carbon dioxide, maybe a bit of methane, or you're the climate scam brigade who say, nah, the science is not settled, it's all just people trying to make money. And that has crowded out curiosity. And that's exactly what we need right now in the last 2 years, because the models do not explain what's happened. And that is super scary, because greenhouse gases undoubtedly will amplify these temperatures that we've got and going to make it worse. Of course, the trajectory is still up, but there could even be hope in this weird last 2 years, which is that, the biohydrological cycles matter more than we realized. So let's do a hell of a lot right now on forest conservation and on ocean health. That would be a nice opportunity for your friends in Greenpeace and WWF and Friends of the Earth and Sierra Club and so on, because they should admit it, that as climate change has dominated contemporary environmentalism, attention to things like saving that bit of forest or that nice wetland or something is kind of fallen off the agenda a bit in terms of charitable giving, foundation giving, public awareness. So actually, what they were always doing really matters, and matters more than we realize, and we kind of lost with this sort of carbon tunnel vision. I published something on this today, and I know that I will be savaged by some climatologists who say, he's just trying to take us away from looking at fossil fuel cuts, and it's not. But so that might be an interesting thing to talk to them about. Which also, by the way, sorry, one other thing. The Brazilian government has said that they need to dig up more of the Amazon rainforest in order to make batteries and wiring for an energy transition to save humanity. And actually, that's not true. Okay, so there's real consequences by allowing the carbon centrists to dominate the discourse on climate. Because actually, no, the Amazon doesn't just matter to the indigenous peoples there, it matters to humanity at large through a global natural cloud seeding process.
Hello, I'm Pedro. I'm a psychotherapist, social anthropologist, and I'm with Climate Psychology Alliance. I just finished an online course with Francesuela on, grief rituals for the climate aware. And, his thesis is that we've over-privatized grief in Western societies, right? We go to our individual therapists, like myself. We do the whole thing very privately to avoid shame. And we lost the practice of organizing ourselves in groups and doing grief collectively. Part of his argument is that what could help is that if we started taking the models of traditional societies and organizing ourselves in grief circles and grief groups in a more public way. I'm interested in your views on it. If within the limits of your privacy, I would be very interested in knowing how do you yourself deal with climate grief and what helps you or doesn't. And I know I might be pushing it a bit, but very last thing is that I'm writing a book. I'm going to talk without this if it's okay. I'm writing a book about how psychotherapy can help with collapse, not just in the private offices, but in our relations, outside of it as we go into collapse. And it's hard to get publishers interested in it, so I wonder if there's any words of wisdom that I can get from you.
So yeah, it's important work you're doing. I didn't know much, if anything, about psychology or psychotherapy before I did my work on deep adaptation 8 years ago. 8 years ago. And so yeah, I had to learn fast. And one of the first things I learned was that if we live in a culture or a community where it's expected to suppress your difficult emotions, then so not even express it individually, just suppress. Then that can have all manner of damaging effects, manifesting in all kinds of ways, including in the most successful people in our society who have really bottled up their difficult emotions, and that's driven them in certain ways. So that applies here, and it applies to all ages. So particularly children, I think, are being gaslit by adults by saying, pull yourselves together, it's not so bad, you need to have hope. That really upsets me. Because I found children have been the most open to thinking about what might be happening compared to adults who have more psychologically invested in how things are. And they don't want to feel pain, they don't want to feel guilt in relation to the younger generations, yes. So I think the work you're doing would be good, perhaps also to explore issues of shame, because I think, the fear of shame blocks people from looking at this with curiosity as well. So it's good work. You asked about, so for me, yes, I did. We set up death cafes rather than grief circles. So we just talk about death and loss. I know I heard some giggling there. But because there are all kinds of emotions around death. Grief is generally understood as sorrow or sadness. I mean, we can unpack it, but people think that. So they were just called death cafes. That was really helpful for me, but that was back in 2018 to 2021 maybe, and I don't. Now I don't know if I have it. I was asked this earlier. It seems to be a theme tonight. I don't have any grief, like climate grief practices. I have ritual practices in community which connect me to the joy of the very fact of life, including death. So that's all my devotional music stuff I do, and I host kirtans, and we're very, very attuned to loss and suffering as part of surrendering to the nature of reality and finding some kind of deep peace from that. So I am a bit allergic to anyone who wants to bring in bliss-seeking spiritualities or salvation stories. My approach to spiritual community with song is more open to the fullness of reality, which includes loss and death. So I guess that's how it's in and I'm quite Buddhist in all of that as well, so that's how I integrate that that's what I do now. Maybe death or grief circles might be appropriate in Lisbon at this moment in particular. I don't know any of you who are affected, but perhaps even more affected than just knowing the place and perhaps knowing people or people who know people. So, would probably be good.
We just ended the previous talk about you sharing that you became a militant mysticist, which I kind of relate to what you just shared. but do you want to add anything else?
So yeah, I came up with the phrase last week, militant mystic, and then as you do nowadays, well I asked ChatGPT, is there any history of militant mysticism? And it told me there's quite a bit. So I don't know much about it, but the mystics I know, one of them is a wonderful guy, Reverend Stephen Wright, and I'm going to see him soon. And he's going to be working with me next year in meta-crisis meetings that I've launched. And so we're going to be doing meta-crisis mentoring, small groups, and it will be quite psycho-spiritually based. But him and other mystics I've met, there's very much this gentleness, which is great, even in a very deep critique of institutional religion and the brutal destruction of the feminine aspect of the divine, and the dominance of liturgy, dogma, work hard to remember this, rather than what practices might open your heart and take away your fear so you can be fully present and connected with everyone you meet and every creature you encounter. Like, they don't... I don't know, I think it would be quite good to be quite gently and calmly extremely belligerent in how we address organized religion. So I'm just exploring that idea. So that's it. It's just an idea. It feels like it's where I might be going with some of my work. But with no rush. I'm not needing to be a hero on this stuff. Yeah.
I have a question, and then we have a question there. You were already quite honest in your paper in 2018, Deep Adaptation. And then you were also you could have chosen to write an academic book about the climate science and making your case for why collapse is inevitable, but you chose to be quite honest and personal in Juntos na Rutura, Breaking Together. So I want to ask you a bit about this decision, if this was always immediate to you, that you wanted to go from a personal, share from a personal angle, and then also how the writing and this process also transformed you and dared you to also go wild, no?
So a really key reason why the book exists is because of Velux windows, the Danish Velux windows. So it was the Rasmussen family who made all the money out of Velux double glazing, and then they put it into a foundation which is called the VKRF Foundation. And Christian Rasmussen read my paper in 2018, so he's one of that family. He's on the board of that foundation, and it caused waves amongst the board, and they decided, I can't remember when, but they decided that they were going to put repurpose all their grant making towards collapse preparedness, softening the collapse, and they were going to also spend down their entire endowment within 10 years to do that, because they realized that there's no point having money in the bank if it's all going to collapse. They approached me whether I would want to be supported to do some work on this. And the kind of I was ready to just be leading a retreat center and playing music and running a small organic farm, badly. But they wanted to support me, and it was like, wow. And then it would mean that I could have a team of researchers. So I could actually hire people to work on lots of different areas, economy and money and biodiversity and agronomy, and analyze the energy systems and stuff. So I gave in to temptation and the story of a contribution, and I accepted the grant, and then I had people working with me for 18 months and did the research. And one of the activities was Scholars' Warning, which was these public letters from scholars about collapse. But one of the silly things I put in the proposal was that I'll produce a book. So yeah, I actually write about it in the book, that after I'd done all the research, it confirmed and made worse. I thought collapse was on the horizon. Then I did the research, thought, oh, it's already underway. Why am I spending all my time in front of a laptop? Why don't I just go and hang out with my friends and enjoy life? Because that's an okay story. I understand the hedonistic reaction, the going wild. It doesn't have to be hedonistic, consumerist, or sex or anything. It can just be going wild. If going wild for you is to learn the harmonium, like it was for me, great. So, yeah, I couldn't bring myself to write a book, but I had to, and I felt a sense of responsibility. So then I collapsed at Stephen Wright's house. And then, and it was then when I realized, yeah, no, I have to do the book, but I have to do the book in my way, which means I have to be very bold, provocative, not worry about upsetting people. I'm going to write this book, which it won't be liked by these people or those people, but it will be my book the way I want to do it. And it will be the last book I ever want to write, and then I'm done. It had I had kind of that kind of spirit to it. So that's how it happened. And that's the way it is. That was the energy for it. So what happened in terms of publishing was it took me so long to do that I couldn't meet a deadline. I think it was for New Society Publishers, and so I talked to an NGO that publishes books, but just on the side. It doesn't exist to publish books, but it likes to publish books as part of what it does as an NGO. And so they agreed to take it just as I would give it to them, the Schumacher Institute. And also they agreed that they would just focus on UK. And so I could use online print on demand to get it for sale quite cheaply worldwide. They also said I would just keep the audiobook rights, so then I got my friend to do the audiobook. And then they also said, yeah, you can keep the translation rights. Because, for them, publishing was just a bit of fun. So it meant that I then had a lot of control of the international and audiobook publishing process. And so that's really helped, and that's why it's been able to come out in Spanish, Hungarian, French, Portuguese, and hopefully Chinese next year. And still be with a publisher. So it's not self-published.
Hi. I'm not a specialist, so I ask you, what do you think reforestation, massive reforestation, could slow down the collapse?
Maybe.
Something else?
No. Like maybe for me is really positive.
How could it be done? Could it be done?
No. Like I am so excited about this maybe. So
how could we do that?
So forest conservation, firstly stopping what we're already doing. Reforestation where we've damaged things. Afforestation, trying to plant forests where there aren't any. Tree migration, so we've got to change the philosophy of conservation, because as the climate's changing, we can't just say, well, that's invasive species or whatever. We have to just work with nature and the trees and help them move. So there are actually people doing that. It's great, and they're kind of presenting a challenge to traditional conservation mindsets. And also agroforestry. We need to look at ways that our agricultural land can also be forested. So there's a huge agenda there. It's loads of people know how to do it. Loads of people know why we still have illegal logging, or why there's just So there's probably a real big challenge in Portugal because of the forest fires. So I guess there will be lots of work to work out how to preserve those forests and help them adapt to drier conditions. I don't know how much of the forest fires are due to diseased trees being vulnerable to fire. It's not my field, but there's a lot of work to be done in that area, and it should be, along with ocean health, the very top of the climate agenda, and it's hardly anywhere near the top of the climate agenda. Might it stop collapse? Well, It's certainly going to soften things and slow things if it was done massively tomorrow. However, it most probably won't, because the situation we're in is not an accident. It's the result of an economic political system. So that economic political system has promoted really stupid ideas that make lots of money to the top of the climate agenda, like carbon capture machines. So that doesn't change. So I say maybe, it's worth trying, but it's not an accident we're in the mess, in the tragic mess that we're in. So the system continues, and therefore the tragic mess continues. So the crucial thing is to find motivation for the maybes, for creative, bold action on the maybes. Might work, might not, but it might. And not be put off because it probably won't work.
But that could be done by everyone, yes? By groups of people in the city, in the country, everywhere.
Yes, we all have different ways of acting. So of course some people will come along and say, well, if there's each and every one of us just plants a few trees, then that will have X amount of impact. But if we all got together and got the Lisbon council or government to do something, then we could have 100 or 1,000 times more impact. And then someone else will come along and say, yes, but that'll take you 10 years, possibly, maybe, to get that policy changed. So I'd say all of the above, do it all. People who come along and say, no, don't do that, you'll never work. It's like, no, it might do. What you're doing might not work. So try everything. Plant trees, ask others to plant trees. And it might not work.
Welcome to Portugal. So I've just recently moved to Lisbon. I've been following and working with you indirectly, but from Cumbria, with Matthew Slater, from Cumbria, Tiflas, MOOC, all the way to today. I'm glad I came to Lisbon. Finally, I got to meet you in the flesh. So one of the many blessings of being in Portugal, including being with these wonderful people. I just wanted to mention, so my journey here has been just very recent. It's been 2 years, but I've seen a massive change in Portugal just over these 2 years, especially since Corona, right? I went to Leiria, where they faced a massive forest fire back in 2017. I came to understand that kind of trees that were set up there were for economic purposes, for paper production, and to answer your question. So now they're reforesting it. I don't know how much of that is left after these fires. But my question to you is, speaking on behalf of many of the people, I live in a Portuguese neighborhood, 70% of the 30-year-olds and over are leaving Portugal in, looking for better opportunities. So that's 70% of all the people who are young and ready to contribute. There's a massive Asian population. Plus, there is Portugal being marketed to the world as the biggest real estate hotel. Come and stay here. Everyone is welcome. And so we're seeing this year and last year the massive amount of fires, etc. That is not, I'm not running the death cafe here, by the way, I'm just trying to state facts as I've seen them in these past 2 years. And I came from the hottest country in the world, which is Kuwait, by the way, so I know what it's like in terms of climate change. So my question to you, Jem, would be, what would your advice be to activists who are in Portugal? I know that they ran activism in terms of the youngsters a few years back, and not many have followed after that. It was right after many of the events that you talked about, and they've been shut down because there's no more real activism. People are fighting for their daily livelihood because things are going up in price, etc. Like I said, youngsters are leaving Portugal. What would you give in terms of hope for, in terms of activism to drive movement from here and then to spread to the rest of Europe? Because as you know, the right wing, Portugal and Spain remain the last of the bastions of the left, where there is still thought processes and people are able to really fight. It's changing fast, of course, I've seen it. But what would your advice be to people in this room? Where can they start and drive sparks? And again, welcome to Portugal.
Yeah, so I used to teach on local currencies and crypto and alternatives, and how about that? You did that, so I hope you bought some Bitcoin back then. That was, of course, or Ethereum even, 2015. You hold them on, okay, great. So, so I don't know anything about Portugal. And so what can I say about what needs to be done? I don't know anything about the politics, the opportunities. I don't know how big the church is, the trade unions, the NGOs, the political landscape, the generational divides. I just so I could start looking and be fascinating. So yeah, I'd be very cautious about saying anything, but yes, you mentioned the rise of the right-wing populist across Europe, and it's not an accident. It's because things have been getting worse. People have been getting poorer across the world, but particularly, across Europe since since about 2015, if not earlier. You can pinpoint the financial crisis of 2008-9 as a start. The policies that made a massive transfer of wealth to the asset rich. Inflation of property prices has happened everywhere as a result of that, which then means that young people can't afford a home. That creates a change in their mentality. Also, that means they won't think about having kids. The whole, all changes lots of things. And yeah, immigration, on the one hand, is wonderful and enriching for a country, but on the other hand, if you're in manual labor, plumbing, construction, or whatever, then you're suddenly having a whole new set of competitors. And so I can understand the grievance that arises. And what we've seen is the banking class and the other elites stoke that resentment, stoke that grievance as a way of giving a grumpy population who are getting poorer, and with young people without the same future as their parents had, they can't aspire to own a home. They're channeling that grievance towards blame the foreigner. And it's working. It's working across Europe. People very close to me in my life who are very intelligent won't stop talking about immigration all the time. And so I think there needs to be, some creative thinking around that issue and how you can meet people in their grievance and frustration and not patronize them and help move people towards real solutions. So I'm giving a talk on that next week in England. So, but I don't know enough about Portugal to say what young people.
Everything about what's happening in Portugal. So you just going to say you said usually nothing, but it's exactly the situation that the young are leaving, they're feeling hopeless, they can't seem to afford a house anymore, they're moving out of the house farther away from the city. It's exactly whatever you just said. So in such a climate, they can't put food on the table, so they'll be worrying about, like you said.
Exactly. All right. So what I would say is that what it means to be a citizen of a country includes economic rights and privileges compared to non-citizens. And so it's not racist at all to say that there should be some privileges of ownership of property and farmland and such like for citizens compared to non-citizens. I live in Indonesia. As a foreigner, even if I'm going to become a permanent resident soon, I'm not allowed to buy land. In 65% of countries in the world, as a foreigner, you're not allowed to buy land. You can lease it, so I've leased my farm for 15 years. But that's because they have an understanding in most countries of the world about how you need to protect your country from economic dispossession by those who wish to buy things up. And we have global capital, and we have mobile transnational capitalist class, and digital nomads and all such. And so they go around and they then buy up land. So that increases the cost of housing and rents and so on, and is making life more unaffordable. In most countries of the world, as foreigners can't buy land. In here, yes, foreigners can buy land. So there are some things that could be looked at which isn't at all anti-immigrant, but it's about recognizing you need to somehow manage what's happening with the property boom. And it wouldn't be unusual. That's over 75% of the world's population are not competing with international capital for the price of a house. That's my speech next week. How to pull the rug out of the far right is to say, because none of them, they're all bankers, they don't say anything about foreigners owning land, because they're quite happy for foreign corporations to come and buy up half of London.
So I have, I hope no one feels offended by what I'm going to say. I have two more men on the queue for questions. I would love to pass the microphone to a woman next time.
I'm not a woman, unfortunately. Is it on? My question is related to a question that was made before, and also to your question, about should we use violence? Should we do sabotage? And your answer was quite interesting. I found that we should find allies inside the factories that could do sabotage from within. But I think nowadays it's very difficult to create those relations, those alliances, also because of the conditions of work. There's a migration and the individualization of work. And my question is related to that, how to build those alliances between different classes, and also about how to talk with the people that are from the extreme right, that you call the eco-authoritarian people. Here in the Iberia, we tend to call eco-fascists. Should we talk with them? Should we try to create a narrative across boards? Like there was a narrative back in the day, it was called socialism, that here in Portugal we ended up like distorting a lot. And yeah, my question is related to that. Should we create a different narrative? What is that narrative? What is the, what should it be?
I think there's great power and potential for the emergence of a solidarity-based politics, so what might traditionally be called left-wing politics, but in an authentic sense rather than the contemporary versions or the authoritarian past versions. So there's potential for the emergence of a new, revived, solidarity-based politics because of just how bad economy, politics, society and the environment have become. So as opinion polls show this, and the rise of nostalgia politics in so many countries where people want to put the clock back, shows this. People no longer believe that if they work hard and pay their taxes and make sure their kids don't annoy the neighbors, that tomorrow life will be better than today. Opinion polls show they don't believe that anymore. That is potentially a massive opportunity for radical politics. And that's perhaps why the world's media are working so hard to get us confused, arguing over stupid things, getting into conspiracy theories and blaming foreigners. Because otherwise this moment of awakening could be very radicalizing. So I think it can be a hopeful time for radical politics. But yes, you're right. How do you build the relationships, particularly if we have everyone thinking that, oh, I'll just post it on Facebook and therefore somehow I've done something for Gaza because I just said how upset I am on Facebook. So we kind of need to find other ways we need to return to other ways of organizing. Even if those other ways of organizing don't give us a dopamine hit or a sense of righteous moral indignation as posting to Facebook does. So I'm guilty of that, like not really doing enough as I could to help build political consciousness and relationships face to face. I don't really do it. I think I've become victim to this social media age and assuming that does something. A lot of interesting political action we don't get to know about. So maybe someone in Raytheon or Elbit Systems is sabotaging some drones on the production line quietly, maybe. So often a lot of stuff is not visible. But these things will happen if awareness grows that that's a good thing to do, for example. Was it Schindler's List in the factories where the Jewish people were being forced laborers to make whatever it was for the Nazi war effort, and Schindler was very keen that they didn't make things properly so they wouldn't work. So industrial sabotage from within has a proud history. I haven't answered your question. I don't know enough about Portuguese politics, and I'm also not down with the young people. You know, I'm 52 now, so I haven't got my finger on the pulse. So what should we do? What should young people do?
I think follow your bliss and really feel what's the calling that is unfolding inside of you, because we're all in different fields here, and that's what I really appreciate about your book, that you're really inviting people to go within and find their ways of contributing. And then I do agree we have to organize, and what I appreciated also about JEM's clarity is, you know, maybe it's time that we don't put our faith in the systems anymore and we start organizing in communities and then really improving the local resilience. So really depending on each other and having solidarity among each other. At least that's what I find meaningful. Yeah.
Yes. I've often said that when things collapse, we'll be collapsing into community, like out of the local community, so we can now work harder at what we will find there when it's what we're relying on. You know, as supermarkets become too expensive and the government doesn't provide the services and so on. If that's the future, then we can work harder at what we'll find in that future, which is community provision.
Hi, Jem. This is Emily. Nice to see you again since Canticle Farm in Oakland. So I have been living and being a part of Portugal for the past 10 years, but I'm from New York State, and I really struggle with my political responsibilities in my home country and my lack of access to political responsibility here within the government. And I'm just wondering for you, how is your experience in living abroad also as a foreigner, and how you feel about your political responsibilities in the UK and those in Indonesia where you live? And how do you consider that are like electoral rights and privileges? Yeah, because I struggle with that, right? Like I should be voting in my home country, so it's not that bad and there's one more vote, right? But it's not working.
So in Indonesia, I don't get politically involved, even in expressing opinions online, because of the politics there and my visa status. So my sort of positive community action in Indonesia is more in the realm of advocacy around organic farming, which can also be a bit upsetting because I am pointing out the fact that Bali is one of the most polluted islands in Southeast Asia, but I try and keep it still like move into positive territory of how we fix this and celebrate fellow Indonesians doing good things. So yeah, and I'm comfortable with that because that feels right for that context. Because Indonesia has also quite a violent history, yeah, and so it's got some dark sides as well. Yeah, I still remain politically involved in the UK a bit, and I'm about to re-enter it next week with the speech I'm doing, and how I worked with Jeremy Corbyn in 2017 in his leadership office and wrote speeches and did things, and I will be sending some ideas in to the people who are in British politics on the left of centre in the next few weeks. So I think I bring something because I don't live there and I watch it. So the same for you. You're watching America from here. Maybe that will give you some insights and you can share that with people. Voting is a very small way of doing anything politically, so perhaps you can have more impact in other ways with your views and analyses and connections. More influence in America, I mean.
We have a question here.
Pass it here and then you.
Didn't you want to give the voice to... Okay, I just want to... I was surprised about the opium of tree planting that was patent in... The microphone is very bad. I was surprised regarding the opium of tree planting. That was like patent in some of the interventions. And I think there's so many planetary boundaries actually crossed, like 7 probably of 9 nowadays, if you have to take into account ocean acidification as well. Yeah, and our whole society is built on the use of fossil fuels that on one side we cannot burn anymore because of the CO2 emissions. On the other side there are no cheap fossil fuels anymore like we used to have in the past. Yeah, so actually we have, I think, and that was actually what I learned from you, I thought I learned from you, that we have to sit with the collapse that is happening. It's a collapse of our industrial civilization and all the amenities that this industrial civilization gives us, in particular the privileged part of this industrial civilization, the global north and the minority world. We have to relinquish this, yeah, and that is. I come back to a point that I made before, but I'm afraid that there was the idea that if we plant enough trees, we could save the world, and we could just have to accept that the world cannot be saved, and not in much less with our personal intervention. Which doesn't mean that we shouldn't plant trees in our neighborhoods to fight urban heat islands, yeah. So it can be has a very local part, but it won't save the world.
Yeah, I find phrases like "save the world" are got to think. We've got to be a bit more precise. So we're not saving industrial civilization. I don't think we can be trying to soften the collapse of industrial societies, and then I don't know what comes next and when. It might be so bad that unless humanity does change everything really fast and plant trees and do something for ocean health and phytoplankton, that the human race is going extinct. So, but I don't know. You know, there are people who will boldly claim, yes, we're definitely going extinct as a species because of all the things. But I don't know, and so a global effort to stop deforestation, to protect the Amazon, for example, might help in some way avert human extinction, save billions of lives. I don't know how much it will help, but it's worth doing because it has because large tracts of forest cool the climate. So that's it. So there are still things worth doing, even if they might not add up to. They might not add up to. Well, they won't have to say saving the world, but. So yes, that's why I was saying they might work, maybe. And so the idea is we find motivation without being attached to stories of salvation, well, either for this society or our children or the human race.
I will speak in English, Jem. So, in addition to plant trees and to organic farming and the industrial sabotage you already mentioned, I would like to say if, because we are equally threatened, wouldn't be important to create spaces for reflection and dialogue with political power based on reality of collapse, special in local level. And in addition, I would like that you, to ask you the power of culture. You referred a lot that you play music, and this is very important for you. Nowadays we have art and culture in elites, and is big power of nutrition to feed ourselves, our inner selves, is, how you say this, it's in that prison in the elites. So I would like that you tell me about the power of art in this dealing with collapse.
I enjoyed your summary of some of the things I said, and but it also reminded me that I'm not recommending that these are the things, you know, everyone go plant trees, everyone do this or that. There are so many choices we can make differently once we give up on the idea we can reform the systems that we've been born into, that we're living into. So it's a wide open landscape of possibilities, and as you were saying, you just give yourself permission to reject society as you find it and find your own way of living your values and making connections, and it will be probably the best things will be quite iterative. Like improv theatre was really important for me because it helped me realize the most interesting things happened when I had no idea and there was no planning. And so yeah, that's just, if there's a motivation to move and to make something happen, then you can find out along the way. So yeah, I don't want to limit a sense of possibilities. So your idea of spaces for dialogue and creative expression, definitely. Any of you who might be in Bali on the 21st of September, we're having an art day at the farm with music, with painting, so like the idea of taking inspiration from nature, and we'll be doing some theatre. So yes, we're very much like, we want to sort of express ourselves as people who are not just constrained by the corporate model of how to produce food, how to hang out together, how to enjoy ourselves. We want to be, prosumers, creating rather than just consuming. So we'll create the music, we'll create the entertainment together at the farm. But yeah, that's our philosophy. Sounds like it's your philosophy too. Yeah.
Yes, we have a project with art, contemporary art, and agroforestry. So we are trying to make this, and the art must be linked with life, not in, now we stop life and now we see the art. So the idea, I don't know how Miguel is here. So we are trying to discover how to make the art, not in stages or in special, but linked with life.
I think one of the worst things that's happened in modernity, or in my life, was the idea that you had to be good at the thing we label art, whether that's music, playing an instrument, or singing, painting, or acting. You have to be good. That's terrible. You just, no. You just be bad and have fun.
So I'm aware of time, and I want to also to allow the opportunity for the autographs and maybe a few necessarily short talks with personal talks with JEM. But I would say, ask if someone really needs to say something, also you, Jem, if you want to add something. Otherwise, I will pass it to Jorge Leandro for no need, okay? So is someone really in need of saying anything else, or should we pass to the autographs moment? Thank you.
If you don't like reading, then buy the book and just read chapter 12. It's where I talk about some of the most amazing people I've met, who I call them doomsters. So not doomers. Doomers sounds a bit dull and boring. Doomer. Whereas doomsters, like that means like masters of doom, people who've looked at doom, accepted doom, integrated it into their understanding of where we're at in the future, and have become more creative and wild and made big important choices and become really useful to others as well in the process. And there are many ways of doing that, and I talk about it. You know, life coaches, shaman, farmers, politicians, activists, yoga teachers, all sorts. I mean, people who've changed their lives because of waking up to how life as we know it is breaking down. So you can all become doomsters.